Hey everyone, it's Karen, and I wanted to review Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. So, I have a lot of feelings about this book, and I'm not quite sure exactly how I feel about it, so I'm hoping this video will kind of help me decide and will be just allowing me to talk through some of the things that I think about this book. So I came to find out about this book because it's basically blasted everywhere. I've known about it for a long time. And then my family and mostly my family, some of my friends, but mostly my family, just raved about this. Like literally everyone had read it and everyone said it was like their favorite book ever. And yeah, so we ended up picking it for our family book club, and we will be reading it this August. So here's the thing though, when people rave about a book so much, it kind of makes me a little skeptical that I'm going to like it. Yeah, so I went into it not knowing if it was going to be overhyped or if I would really enjoy it. So this book interweaves two stories. One is Kaya, who is growing up in basically a marsh in a shack. She lives with her mom, dad, and 4 other siblings, but as the novel goes on, it starts in 1952 when she is 6 years old, and as it goes on, her family just slowly leaves until finally it is her living in a shack by herself as a child. The other story that's going on in this book is the story of Chase Andrews, who is found murdered in 1969, and they're trying to figure out what happened to him. So I want to start by talking about the good things I liked about this book. I found this story pretty engaging, and throughout the summer I kind of developed different routines for myself since I'm not working, and my most recent routine, which has lasted about a week, is that every night before I go to bed I watch an episode of Vera, which I'm obsessed with. And last night it became time for me to watch Vera, and I was just like, no, I just want to finish this book. So it definitely was engaging, and I wanted to find out what happens. So even though this story was really engaging, there wasn't a ton of depth to it. Like it just was kind of a just right there story. There were some themes in it, but it wasn't like, I don't know, as deep as I like to go in my reading. I also found it super predictable. I guessed on page 61 about who I thought the murderer was, and I ended up being correct. There was one part towards the end of the book that made me question who I thought it was, but I ended up being right. So for most of the book, I knew what the ending would be, although I didn't exactly know all the little details. But for it to be this big twist at the end, I did not see it as a big twist. I also thought this story was really unlikely, which I know it's fiction, but I just didn't feel that a child living alone in a swamp, well, actually it was a marsh, sorry, not a swamp, living in a marsh or by a marsh in a shack would be able to survive, would be left alone in the way she was. The author describes like why she was left alone and able to live in that way, but it just doesn't seem very plausible to me, which is fine because it's fiction, but I also feel like you do need to be able to believe a little bit. There needs to be enough realism in fiction to have you think that it could happen. Finally, there's a black character in here named Jumpin', and I just felt he was kind of like a stereotypical black man written by a white author. The author, I believe, is in her 70s or so. She's kind of an older lady from the South, and I just felt like she just wrote him as like this just joyful black guy. And there was one point where he gets really attached to our main character Kaya, and there was one point where something bad happens to Kaya and he gets all mad and wants to like report it to the police, and yeah, snitches get stitches. That would not happen. So yeah, I just thought that he was kind of a flat character and not super realistic. Overall, I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars just because I found it engaging, but it's not like there's no like literary merit or anything of this book. Okay, so now that you know a little bit about what I thought about this book, I would like to talk about the controversy behind this book. So I had already read it, and I woke up this morning and found a message on my Goodreads from my friend Jason from Old Booze Chapter and Verse, and he basically just said, did you hear about the controversy surrounding this book? Well, I hadn't, so I Googled this article, which ended up that he sent me the same article later. But anyway, it was just about the author and her experiences in Africa. So the author is very open about the fact that she and her husband lived in Africa for quite some time, and they were kind of, I think she calls herself a scientist. She was studying animal behavior, and yeah, that's not really everything. So her and her husband were in Botswana, and they ended up getting kicked out of Botswana. So they went to Zambia. In Zambia, they kind of became the protectors of animals, and they formed this tribe of like scouts is what they called them. And they would just protect the animals, watch out for poachers, stuff like that. Well, there was a poacher that was killed, and it was filmed on camera, and her stepson was accused of killing the poacher. There's also a letter that was found talking about the scouts. This was written by her husband, who is now her ex-husband, but he said that they killed 2 poachers and they were just getting warmed up. So this book might be about a murder, but it sounds like the author might have had involvement in the murder of at least 2 poachers in Africa. So it doesn't sound like the author herself was directly involved, but it sounds like her son was directly involved in the killing, and the husband kind of helped cover up. There's some suspicion that he took one of the bodies up into his helicopter and then dropped it into a lake. This is all just speculative. No one really knows what happened, but they are not allowed in Zambia anymore, and they have not been back, and now they live in a really rural area of the United States. They have since separated. Just very suspicious. One thing I also found interesting, just talking to Jason about it, is he was talking about how it seems that this has really been covered up, that there hasn't been the controversy in the news very much. And what I find is interesting is this book, American Dirt, the controversy was everywhere. And for this one, which the controversy seems almost like more horrific, that the author could actually have been involved in a real murder, it's kind of been like covered up. I'm curious if you guys have read Where the Crawdads Sang, what you thought about it and what you think about this controversy regarding the author possibly actually being involved in murder. I'll see you guys later. Bye.